I think you're going to find that Bobby he's a very rational guy. I found him to be very rational. No, nothing, you're not going to lose the polio vaccine. That's not going to happen. I saw what happened with the polio. I have friends that were very much affected by that. I have friends from many years ago, and they have, obviously, they're still in not such good shape because of it. And many people died. And the moment they took that vaccine, it ended. Dr. Jonas Salk did a great job, so I don't anticipate that at all.
We are going to start where we just left off, with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago wrapping up an extended Q&A with reporters, the first time we've seen that since winning re-election. And he has been talking about a slew of things: his cabinet picks, the borders, foreign affairs, the drones over New Jersey, whether he'd privatize the post office, TikTok, all kinds of things, including just now we heard him asked about whether or not Bashar al-Assad should be forced to leave Russia, and he said he hadn't thought about that. Talked about Zelensky and Ukraine, got to be prepared to make a deal. He commented on everything from the Duke lacrosse scandal and very, very, very many other issues. We want to start where this started, which is on the economy. And Donald Trump tried to plug a $100 billion investment from a Japanese tech billionaire. CNN's Elena Treen is there in West Palm Beach, right by the president-elect's resort. Our fact checker, Daniel Dale, is also here. Elena, such a wide-ranging news conference. Where do you want to start? Because we are going to spend a lot of time breaking down and fact-checking what the president-elect said.
I mean, there is a lot, as you mentioned, Dana, that he covered. This was a very wide-ranging press conference. I would argue as well, or I'd note that it was not entirely clear if he was going to be taking questions when reporters went into the room where he was giving this announcement about that major investment from the SoftBank CEO. It was $100 billion with the promise of trying to create 100,000 jobs. That is double what this same group, SoftBank, announced in December of 2016 after Donald Trump first won his election for the White House. But there, again, I want to get into the Q&A part in that news conference, because that is where Donald Trump actually made a lot of news. One thing I want to talk about, because I know this has been such a big focus on so many people's minds, is what is happening with the drones over New Jersey, my home state. I know my family's worried about this too. Donald Trump said that he didn't want to get into whether or not he's been briefed on it, but he argued that he believes that the government knows exactly what is happening and that they should be identifying what the cause of this is. I want you to take a listen to what he said.
The government knows what is happening. Look, our military knows where they took off from. If it's a garage, they can go right into that garage. They know where it came from and where it went. And for some reason, they don't want to comment. And I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Our military knows, and our president knows.
Now, Dan, I know we have Daniel Dale standing by to fact check some of this, but I will argue that what Donald Trump said there is very much not the same from what we've heard from these exact government officials over this weekend. We did hear from DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas this weekend addressing this. We also heard from many FBI officials and those at DOJ, all of them kind of trying to assuage the concerns of voters who are seeing these drones, while also arguing that they have a right to be concerned. Mayorkas said this weekend that there's no question people are seeing these drones, that they have promised the federal government will give more assistance to New Jersey State Police, but also said that they're still trying to find answers on this. They don't believe that this is a major national security concern, something Donald Trump also just argued in that sound that you heard, but that, again, they still need to get to the bottom of this. And so this is something that I find, very interesting to see whether or not, as we continue reporting this out, whether Donald Trump is actually getting his own updates on this. Some other big areas that he went into, TikTok. I think he addressed, really publicly for the first time his stance on TikTok. He had wavered on this over the campaign trail. We know in the past Donald Trump had threatened to ban TikTok. That has since changed. Donald Trump said today that he has warmed up to TikTok because he believes many young people voted for him, so they'll be looking into it, but seemed, less inclined to do so. That's just two things that he said in a number of topics that he addressed today at that press conference.
And I just want to go. Thanks, Elena. I just want to go back before I get to you, Daniel. I'm going to do a little Daniel Dale right now and say that while the president-elect was speaking and saying what you just played, alleging that the government knows, suggesting that there is something nefarious going on and that he knows that, I was texting with a senior administration official who said that they did an interagency briefing on this yesterday, and they were told that it is a mix of fixed wing aircraft with pilots, commercial drones, law enforcement replacing old police choppers, and recreational. Nothing anomalous found. 1 million registered drones in the US, 8,000 in the sky every day. So that is what the administration is saying on the drones. There's so much more to talk about, but because he weighed in and leaned into and explicitly said that President Biden knows what's going on here, and that he suggested he wasn't even interested in going to Bedminster, his club in New Jersey, because that's where most of them were. It's important to say what the current administration, who has the active people looking at this, are saying. Okay, Daniel, I'm going to go to you now and talk about something so incredibly crucial, which is Robert Kennedy Jr.'s stance on vaccines and mandates, and by extension, more importantly, what the president-elect's views and comments were on vaccines.
I think everything should be looked at, but I'm a big believer in the polio vaccine.
Do you think schools should mandate vaccines?
I don't like mandates. I'm not a big mandate person. So, I was against mandates. Mostly Democrat governors did the mandates, and they did a very poor thing.
Okay, so Daniel, it seems like he was asked about all vaccines, and his answer appeared to be focused on COVID. But he also talked pretty extensively about other vaccines, the ones that have been in place for decades, particularly for young people, as a mandate to go to school. He talked about polio, for example. So talk about what he said there and give us a bit of a fact check, which is so crucial.
Sure. So there was a lot of lying from the president-elect at this press conference, but I think the most dangerous part was an equivocation. It wasn't really a claim, but he was asked whether he thought there was a link between vaccines and autism, and he equivocated. He said, well, we have some brilliant people looking at this, and he talked about the increased prevalence of autism diagnoses. Look, there is no link between vaccines and autism. This notion has been discredited by study after study over decades. The idea that there is some connection came from a thoroughly discredited, in fact, scandalous, fraudulently altered study in the 1990s that should just be ignored, dismissed again because it was fraudulent. And so the idea that, well, we're just going to look into this, I think is dangerous to consider because the idea is simply wrong. I'll pivot to some other topics. He talked, as usual, about tariffs, said under his first presidency, we took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China. That money was paid by Americans. It is American importers who pay the tariffs, not Chinese exporters, and many of those importers pass along the costs to U.S. consumers. He said no previous president had tariffs on China. That's wrong. He said there was no inflation under his own presidency, despite the tariffs, certainly lower than during the Biden presidency, but there was 8% cumulative inflation during his presidency, so not nothing. In talking about health, he also said, oh, Europe has lower mortality than us, or better mortality, and they don't use pesticides. Europe uses hundreds of thousands of tons of pesticides every year, so I'm not sure where he got that idea. And earlier in the press conference, Dana, he said over and over, I think 3 times, that during his presidency, there were no wars, like no wars, period, in the world. That is simply not true, a rewriting of history. One research institution said there were active armed conflicts in about 50 states in 2020, including, of course, civil wars in Yemen, in Syria, in Somalia. We had an active Israeli-Palestinian conflict, U.S. troops deployed in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and elsewhere. So the idea that this was a world at peace left by Donald Trump to Joe Biden, simply not true.
Okay, well, thank you for all that. And I just want to underscore where you and I started our conversation, Daniel, which is on the suggestion that it is possible that autism is caused by vaccines. As you said, there was a 1998 study that has been completely discredited. There have been rigorous peer-reviewed studies that are credible, including some that analyze more than 1 million children that have shown there is no link between autism and vaccines.